This video will cover how you can get this Blackflame Samurai build going in about 30 minutes of starting a new game. We'll also cover the locations of every spell, talisman, and possible armor sets you might need for this build. And most importantly, we'll cover how you can upgrade this build as you progress the game. You might even want to use this build when the DLC comes out. The weapon we're using for this build is the Nagakiba. The reason being it's the longest katana in the game, pretty much double the reach of the Uchigatana, and that extra reach can really come in handy. Not to mention it just looks really sick. Of course you can use the Uchigatana if you really want to. What's important is that we need to use a weapon which has intrinsic bleeding, meaning the weapon comes with bleed by default and not through any Ashes of War. So 3 amazing early game weapons that can still be buffed by Blackflame Blade or Bloodflame Blade would be the Uchigatana, Nagakiba, or even the Bloodhound's Fang. Bloodflame Blade will only take the intrinsic bleed a weapon has and boost the bleed buildup, causing enemies to bleed faster. Then, with all the Black Flame spells, you're essentially applying a damage over time effect on enemies while simultaneously building up bleed, which ends up being a very, very deadly combination. Now, to get the Nagakiba, we'll either have to complete Yura's quest or kill him. It's up to you to decide which way you want to go through with. Personally, I like to use this weapon straight from the start, so I killed him immediately after starting a new game. In that case, you can find Yura here, south of Lake Agil in Limgrave. Pro tip, Yura can hit you like a truck, so use Unsheath on your Uchigatana and you can pretty easily kill him. Next thing we need is the Godslayer Seal, because it boosts Godslayer incantations. So the location of this is going to be in Stormvale Castle. If you know where this main courtyard is, just take this tunnel straight down, where you'll find these 2 chests with the Godslayer Seal and a prayer book which you can give to either Brother Corinne or Miriel Pastor of Vows, allowing you to purchase Blackflame and Blackflame Blade. We can also get Bloodflame Blade early on. Here is its location. You have to kill this scarab that's just north of the Rose Church in Liurnia. Now as for your early game armor, you can use pretty much any set as long as you can mid-roll. In my case, I stuck with the default Reed's Samurai set. Now for the talismans for our level 50 build. First, we're going to be using Radagons Soreseal. Because our weapon scales on dexterity, we need to pump levels into dex to boost our weapons damage, which ends up leaving less points for other stats. So Radagons Soreseal will give you 5 points each for your vigor, endurance, and mind, freeing you up to invest more into dex. The next talisman would be the Green Turtle Talisman. The Green Turtle Talisman is great for stamina recovery because Blackflame Blade only has a short duration, which means you're going to be frequently recasting it, which uses stamina. Not to mention constantly using Sword Dance means our endurance gets drained pretty fast. But now, let's talk about the mid to end game, level 150 version of this build. So for the weapon, we'll be using the Cross Naginata, just so we can stick with the samurai theme, and like I said before, we need to be using a weapon that has bleed intrinsically. But there is one main reason we're going to use the Naginata, and that's Phantom Slash. Phantom Slash shoots a phantom forward that charges and attacks, which you can then follow up with your own charge and attack. And then you can follow that up with another attack. This gives you 4 hits in the span of a few seconds, and they hit significantly harder than your regular attacks. The cool thing about Phantom Slash is that if your weapon has Blackflame Blade or Bloodflame Blade applied, your Phantom will also have those buffs with its attacks. Another great aspect of this ability is that as soon as you start the animation, even if you get hit, the Phantom will still fire off. This is really useful in scenarios where you need to finish off a weak boss, bleed an enemy, or even in a PvP situation where an enemy is very aggressive. You can mash L2 and stagger them, which might help you get out of that tricky situation. Of course, you can still use the Nagakiba and Sword Dance combination, which is still pretty strong, but Phantom Slash is just stronger, you know. You can also use the Naginata with something like the Repeating Thrust Ash of War plus Bloodflame Blade, but that's more suited for a bleed type build. So even for the level 150 build, we're gonna stick with using the Godslayer Seal. Even if you don't use any of the Blackflame incantations, with 60 faith, it has very good scaling for incantations at this point in the game. In fact, it's probably one of the best seals you can use as a pure faith caster. The armor for this build is pretty sick. I'm using the Ronin set, but you can also have the white mask on for an extra 10% attack power boost whenever bleed happens. Or even better, might be the Okina mask, which gives you an extra 3 levels into dex, which might come useful as our weapon scales on dexterity. Beyond that, you can also use the white reed set because it's the perfect samurai cosplay. Now, when it comes to talismans, we want to still use Radagons Soreseal for the simple reason that it frees you up to put points into other stats. Shard of Alexander will increase Phantom Slash's damage by 15%. Considering we're going to be using our L2 attack all the time, this talisman will definitely come in handy. Godfrey Icon boosts the damage of charged spells like Scouring Blackflame, Blackflame, and Blackflame Ritual. Even if you don't have a ton of FP, when using your ranged attacks, you want them to be as effective as possible. Lastly, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman reduces the physical damage you take, which helps offset the increased damage from Radagons Soreseal. This is particularly useful, since you'll often trade damage while using Phantom Slash, and this talisman helps you survive those trades. For spells, we're using Golden Vow, Bloodflame Blade, Blackflame Blade, Blackflame, Scouring Blackflame, Blackflame Ritual, and Blackflame's Protection. Golden Vow increases your overall damage by 15%, including weapon skills, regular attacks, and spells. It also boosts your defense, which is crucial for surviving attacks. Blackflame Blade adds a lot of fire damage to each attack. It's particularly effective against enemies that are resistant or immune to bleed. Blackflame is going to be your strong ranged attack. It can also be charged for extra damage. Scouring Blackflame is your AoE ability, hitting enemies in a wide radius. With practice, you'll find that you can wipe out packs of enemies with just one cast. Blackflame Ritual is another excellent spell, especially against aggressive bosses. It creates a circle of black flame that damages enemies inside it. Cast it early in the fight and let enemies walk into it while you follow up with Phantom Slash. Black Flame's Protection increases your physical resistance, allowing you to use Phantom Slash more safely. You'd want to use this in combination with Golden Vow. So now let's talk about the attributes required for both builds, starting with the level 50 version. The main attributes for this build are Vigor, Mind, and Faith. You need a lot of Mind because spells like Blackflame consume significant FP. You need at least 27 Faith to use the Godslayer Seal, but higher Faith will benefit your spells more. Vigor should be at least 20, since you need to be able to trade hits and survive. Dexterity will come down to whichever levels meet the weapon requirements. And since our weapon scales on Dexterity, which boosts its damage, we could pump a few more levels into Dex, just to get some extra damage. Allocating points between Strength and Dex will vary slightly depending on your chosen weapon. For example, Bloodhound's Fang requires more Strength, so you need to adjust accordingly. As you level up, focus on increasing Faith, Mind, and Dexterity while maintaining enough Vigor to survive. A bonus tip here would be to use Radagons Soreseal. It would add 5 points each to Vigor, Endurance, Strength, and Dexterity, which you could use to either save up on some runes, or use to allocate points into another attribute entirely. Now moving on to the level 150 attributes. Something to remember is that your base stats would change depending on your starting class. Mine was Samurai, so my stat spread ended up being like this. It's pretty much the same as the level 50 version. We continued leveling up Vigor in order to tank any hits we take. My Mind is at 33 in order to have enough FP to use all the spells and weapon skills. My Endurance is at 20. You could have this lower and maybe invest into some more Vigor. But I wanted to have better stamina for the Katana build. And again we have Dexterity at 50 because our weapon scales on Dex. And Faith is at 60 because leveling up Faith will increase the effectiveness of your incantations. The 10 Arcane is necessary for Bloodflame Blade, but we don't need more since our seal doesn't scale with Arcane. Intelligence is not required for this build, and Strength is just to meet any item requirements.